So we'll see if anybody actually joins this stream, because cleverly, this is my first ever live stream and I managed to screw it up. I didn't select the right webcam. So I ended that stream thinking that that I could just go back in, but no, YouTube in its infinite wisdom, that just ends the stream. So if anybody's hit the notification button on this, then I'm sorry, but this is going to have to suffice instead. So welcome. This is our first ever live stream. Very new to me, so I'm just going to, I think, probably talk about. There's a couple of things that I think I do want to talk about, which to the members, I will give you a bit more kind of background on kind of my life and how I came to be a problem drinker, really. So I'm in my 40s, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and alcohol was a very different thing back then. It was seen as cool. And I remember being 15 years old in a place just outside Portsmouth, which is where I grew up, and being with all my friends, and we were kind of on this golf course, being naughty as you do when you're like 15 years old, and somebody had some beers, I think it was, and I'd never drunk before, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. And I remember just having like half a beer, it being disgusting as well as it is at that age, and I could sort of feel it. And I guess that's when it started, because I've always had a very active brain, and something that we'll talk about in a bit, I think, is why people come to alcohol. But we'll save that for later in the stream. But I think one of the big sort of things for me is it sort of quietened down that kind of constant noise in my brain, which I now know to be anxiety. And I sort of, I guess if I were born a bit, if I was born in the 2000s, I'd have probably been diagnosed with ADHD. But who knows if these things are real or not? But they're just sort of diagnosed to medicate kids, I think. But I don't want to get too like political or anything like that. But I remember feeling like, oh, this is it, and that's kind of when it really started for me, because it made me feel less anxious. I was quite a socially awkward kid, believe it or not. And once I kind of discovered this little shortcut, and as a kid, you've got no one there to kind of tell you this is a bad idea. Once I discovered that, there was no kind of stopping me. So clearly there was not a problem yet, but fast forward a few years, as I'm sort of getting to 17, 18, 19 years old, and that's when my drinking really kind of took off as well. I discovered clubbing and DJing, and it was in the 90s, so it was right in the kind of height of like rave culture and stuff. So I was DJing, I discovered this, and I was doing all kinds of stuff. There was drugs and alcohol and women and all kinds of stuff, and it was just it was a pretty good time. But or it was I say a pretty good time. It would have been much better without the alcohol and without the drugs. I don't regret too many things in my life, but that's definitely part of it. That's definitely two of the things that I would say that I regret. If I had my time over again, I would definitely not be drinking and not doing drugs. It would have been so much more fun. I'd have been better. I'd have been more successful. But anyway, so yeah, obviously in my group of friends, I just became known as the drinker. I was the kind of the wild one in a bunch of wild people, really. And I'm guessing that a lot of people that are watching this maybe have a similar story, because the people that I work with generally have a similar story, where they are quite how how to put it, they're quite outgoing, I guess, and they tend to be the kind of wildest one in the group. And again, we'll come onto that probably later in the stream. So once I'd discovered this kind of hack, if you like, and I was drinking all the time and, just being a bit of a degenerate, if I'm completely honest, at that sort of age, I actually ruined a bunch of friendships, and I ruined a kind of promotion business, a club night promotion business and a relationship as well. I had my girlfriend. I ruined that with alcohol, but thought, I didn't think I was at fault because I was, 21 years old, and I don't think I was a particularly mature 21-year-old either. So I ended up moving to London on my own. I had a little bit of money saved. I had some money in my pocket, and basically my drinking just accelerated beyond kind of all control, and I ended up in real financial trouble. And this would not be the first time that this would not be the last time that this would happen. So dear viewer, so stick around, and there's been all kinds of problems. And as I've said in a previous video, when I sat down and did an audit of all of this stuff, everything that was completely negative in my life was caused by alcohol. And you sit down and you look at it and you go over things that have gone wrong, relationships that fell apart, businesses that fell apart, and alcohol was always at the center of it. Or in fact, let me rephrase that. My use of alcohol my excessive use of alcohol was always at the center of that. So, I can't shift the blame onto it's alcohol's fault. I mean, sure, alcohol was involved, but it was my fault. Anyway, so basically what happened, I was drinking so much that I just burned through all of the money that I had. I ended up getting basically kicked out of the place that I was living. I was seeing a girl at the time that I just kind of bummed around off her. She let me live with her, and I was just being basically a loser until I finally sort of, I stopped drinking. I got myself under control. But as with all of these things, once I got my life a bit more looking how I wanted it, what did I do? Of course, I went back to drinking, as we tend to do. So sorry, I got distracted by the guy walking down the stairs. I'm in my $10 million mansion, but obviously I'm in a hotel. I went back to the drink, and I mean, again, this is now that I'm recounting this story, there's been a few occasions where more than I'd realized, where alcohol has completely kind of collapsed part of my life. But yeah, to cut a long story short, I ended up bumming around for a bit. I spent time as in the UK we call them estate agents, but in the US it'd be like a realtor. And I spent some time doing that before falling into the recruiting and staffing sector, where I was about 26 years old, something like that. And I just fell into a recruitment job. It was a sales job. It was something I could do. And, I gave it a try, and lo and behold, I was actually really good at it. And I ended up then setting up my own business. And you can imagine, so there's a lot of client dinners, there's a lot of meeting people, there's a lot of, there's a bit of a bro culture there where you're all kind of making money, doing deals. You go to the, hard drinking, hard living, hard selling kind of people. And that sort of culture, especially in central London, it really suited me. It really permeated everything I did, and made me feel important, made me feel great, and made me feel like, you know, I was untouchable. I was earning money, more money than I'd ever earned before, had a great girlfriend, had a place in central London where I lived. It was, fantastic. And as you can guess, 2008 happened, which was the great financial crisis, and I was just, drinking like a fish, basically. And I was completely unable to focus on the business. I had, staff, offices, all these kinds of things that just kind of imploded. And all of this is through drinking. And once all of that imploded, so I went from this, quite wealthy, well, I say quite wealthy, but, more than average person with a business and staff and central London offices, and this whole identity of like, I'm the shit, my shit doesn't stink, to literally having no money and having to, move back to a place in the UK called Oxford, which sounds lovely, but it's actually a dump. I was, 34 years old, something like that, maybe a little bit older, maybe 35, and moving into all I could afford was a shared house with students that were like, 18, 19 years old. So you can imagine the sort of humiliating climb down that was. Not great. And I spent a lot of time struggling with this because I'd had basically my identity sort of ripped away from me, if you like. And I had this identity of I was this kind of successful business person, and I hadn't really reconciled the fact that, I couldn't do both. Like I couldn't run a successful business and I couldn't, burn the candle at both ends. So I was still laboring under this kind of illusion that I could turn everything around. But what was happening, as you can imagine, so there was a lot of feeling sorry for myself, and I was, drinking way more than I had ever. And I spent, it's sort of, I look back at it now and I'd spent a couple of years doing that. Like it was really quite sort of bad, to the point where, I was quite sort of disheveled. I wasn't eating properly. I was drinking too much. I was smoking like a chimney. And I think I've told this story in another one of my videos, but a friend of mine who actually, she actually helped me get completely free of alcohol. But this is years later. She came to visit me, and she was just like, we haven't seen each other in a while, because I was completely isolating myself, which is another sign of having a problem with the drink. And she came to see me, and she was like, she would go for dinner. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll meet you somewhere. She was getting the train, so I was like, yeah, I'll meet you at this place in Oxford. It's a restaurant called Brown's. It's quite nice. And I turned up, and because I had no real frame of reference of what normal life looked like for a couple of years, I was dressed like shit. I had a t-shirt on with like holes in the arms, and it was just, I just looked a fucking mess, and I was just, completely unkempt and just looked awful. And she didn't say anything, but a little bit later on, she was like, Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. She was like, you don't look okay. And then obviously we had a conversation around, perhaps I was isolating myself too much. So once that had happened, it started a chain of events in motion that meant that I sort of got myself a little bit back together. I started another business. That went really well. Started another business, with a business partner, which in hindsight was a huge mistake, because he was a heavy drinker, as was I. And what ended up happening is we actually ended up doing quite well again. And I moved to a place in the UK called Bristol, which is, I'm actually filming this in Bristol now in a hotel. And we had quite a successful business for a while, but we were just drinking every night. We were drinking literally every night. like getting absolutely smashed. And we were just living in this kind of perpetual cycle of like enabling each other, to the point where we did this, I think, for 2 years, and it eventually came to a head at the sort of Christmas time in 2016. I was monitoring how much I was drinking on this app, and I couldn't believe how much I was drinking, because I knew I basically had a problem. And every time I tried to broach the subject with my business partner of like, maybe we should not drink, he would be like, oh yeah, no, things are fine. But then sometimes he would say, I don't want to drink, and I would be the bad influence. So we don't speak these days, because I'll tell you the conclusion to this story in a minute. But if you asked him, I'm sure that he would have he would probably have the same retelling of events. He would say that I was just as bad as him, which is actually true. I was just as bad as him. So it's not, I'm not blaming him, but we were basically enabling each other, and we were not kind of strong enough to resist one another, and we were just kind of in each other's orbit of this kind of completely kind of fucked up situation. So what ended up happening at Christmas time in 2016 is we went out and we just drank crazy, and things had been a bit tetchy for a while, but they just completely boiled over in this Christmas, and we ended up basically having pretty much a fist fight over absolutely nothing. And we were so drunk, and I remember waking up the next morning and just thinking, oh my God, what has gone on? And I just thought, I can't live like this, So I ended up terminating that relationship. Basically, I ended up leaving the business and just thinking, I'm done. And we've not spoke since. So if he ends up seeing this someday, I hope he's all right. And I knew then that January 2017, that's it, I'm done. And I managed to kick it, but I still wasn't fully ready and prepared to do what was required, because I still couldn't. But even after all of this, I still couldn't get my head around the fact that I had to eliminate alcohol from my life. Now, not everyone has to eliminate alcohol from their life, but I did, and I have. But what I was doing was because my birthday's in April, and I was thinking, well, I'll not drink until April, and then I'll have proved to myself that I don't need alcohol. So against all the odds, I completely quit booze until my birthday in April, and I drank on my birthday, and I was okay. I was fine. It was like, oh, okay, that's not a huge deal. But you can guess what happened, because I have a problem with alcohol. Is that one occasion then turned into two? Like, did I drink every day after that and get blasted? No. But then I started drinking once a week. Then it was twice a week, and over a couple of months, you just get kind of sucked back into the kind of the gravitational pull of alcohol. Just kind of pulls you back into the kind of the black hole of fucking nonsense. And that's what I fell back into. And not to put sort of too fine a point on it, I spent the next few years working solo in my recruitment business with just some sort of remote staff and one other person, and just working on not drinking and not spinning my life out of control again, which I managed to do. But there were so many problems along the way. Do you know what I mean? Like, there were so many things I was not prepared for, so many emotional conflicts, so many triggers. And I had various relapses along the way. I don't like the word relapse, but whatever. I tends to be used for like raging alcoholics that people like Backcountry and people like that on YouTube, that he was drinking bottles of vodka every day and stuff. I was never that person, but I was close. And the reason that I set up Clear Mind is to help people that are, not alcoholics, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not medically qualified, and me just kind of talking to somebody that has, an extreme addiction is not a responsible thing to do. But if you are somebody that was like me, that's drinking excessively, but is not, I guess a raging alcoholic. I think the term is, if you're circling the kind of drain rather than down it, then I can certainly help you stop, because it's actually quite simple. Not easy, but it is quite simple. So, as I've said in a couple of these videos, there are three core kind of phases to quitting, and there's three core phases to kind of anything really. And this is like, if you want to achieve something, whatever it is, doesn't have to be quitting drinking, but it's anything. Okay, there's this initial honeymoon period. There's this short window of, I'm going to do this. I can do it. There's, I've got this. You're full of enthusiasm. You're full of all, you're not suffering any of the major consequences yet. You've got, you're a bit delusional. You've got kind of delusional self-confidence. You don't know what you don't know. And this period is easy. Where everything goes wrong is this middle period, this long middle period, where you start to realize the enormity of the task, and you start to see the mountain in front of you, and you think, oh man. And especially with drinking, or quitting drinking, is you don't know when it's going to end. It's like being stuck in a forest with no way out, and you don't know what path to take, and every day you are just stuck with your own thoughts, and you're just stuck with your own emotions, and you're not feeling yourself. You're not feeling great. You're maybe more anxious. You're maybe depressed. You're maybe snappy with people, unhappy. And because you don't see an end, you don't know when it's going to end, that's when you crack, and you just think, screw it, I'm going to have a drink. Because what the drink does is it pulls you out of that straight away, immediately. And it's like pressing a button to make the torture stop, But the problem, as we know, is that you're then back on that hamster wheel. You're back on the drinking hamster wheel. Whereas if you just pushed through this long middle, you'd come to the end point, which I call the inflection point. And if you've watched these videos, you'll know, is you hit that inflection point, and it doesn't just go, oh, that's great, we'll carry on. Your life kind of goes boom, and it just kind of zooms upwards, where you start to achieve things that you want. You start to get the relationships you want. You start to get the promotion. You start to get the clients for your business. You start to just feel better. You start to get healthier, fitter, and all of these things start compounding. So rather than having, this is my little phrase of the moment, the gravitational pull of like the alcohol and the nonsense, what happens is you start building another sort of gravity well of positivity, of things that happen. And not to get too woo-woo, but you start attracting much more positive things into your life. And I don't mean like The Secret and think yourself rich and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that. But I'm just talking about generally, if you're more positive, and you will be if you're not drinking, more positive things tend to happen. You tend to put that energy out into the world. People see it. People want to be around you. People want to work with you. It's just these sort of subtle things that, as I say, gravitationally, they're kind of circling you. And as you do better and better things, these things coalesce as they want to be kind of part of your existence, part of your life. So that's the point that you want to get to, but you don't know where that is. I don't know where that point is. For some people, it's a month away. For some people, it's kind of 6 months away. That's why I work with people for 6 months at least, because the whole you can stay in the program forever. You know what I mean? Until I stop doing this, which, I don't know, is not going to be any time soon in the next, 10 years or whatever. this is my life now. I really enjoy doing this and helping people. But what you need, to use the analogy of the forest, if you like, as we said before, where you don't know what path to take, my job with you is to talk you, initially anyway, is to talk you through the forest. And I am going to, metaphorically hold your hand and kind of pull you forward and say, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. Everything's good. Everything's fine. We're going to get to the end. And you need somebody in your corner. And I don't mean like a sponsor or something like that, although I can act like that. So we have Discord. We use Discord as a kind of community now. And if you come into the program, you'll have the group Discord, but you'll also have an individual private Discord chat with me that you can always reach out to me on, and we can help you land the plane. We can talk you through any problems that you're having. But yeah, so this is not really like AA. I'm not a massive fan of AA, but it's having somebody there that can give you I say the strength, but it's also the confidence, I think, is the key thing, that can give you the confidence to realize that there is an end, because alcohol is a bitch in the sense that it tricks you and it convinces you that there's no end. It convinces you that, like, I'm stuck like this now. How I feel now, 3 weeks in without drinking, I feel bored, I feel low, I feel emotional, I'm not seeing any benefit, I might as well have a drink. All of this kind of nonsense that you tell yourself is really powerful as time goes along. It's like water torture. There's one drip of water is not, in and of itself is not a problem. But once you start having, the 10,000th drip of water on your head, it feels like somebody's hitting you with a hammer. And that's where the relapsing happens, is in this period of this middle kind of sucking period of boredom and pain and annoyance and all of these things. So that's where I come in. That's where I stop you. And then once you get past that initial period of actually, you start believing and start understanding that there is an end to this, that's when the focus of the program can shift to how do we propel you to that inflection point that I was talking about, because you're going to have the day-to-day strength, if you like, or the day-to-day confidence to understand that drinking is actually not what you want to do. You're bored, or you have a hyperactive mind. You have a brain that wants stimulation. It wants something. When you quit drinking, people, they start drinking 10 cups of coffee a day, or they smoke 2 packs of cigarettes. Me, you can tell I've got a little bit of chub on me. I went drinking. I went eating food, and I found solace in other things. And it's just, we'll get you through that, and we'll make sure that you don't just replace one bad habit with another bad habit. Admittedly, it's you'd rather be doing, I guess you would rather be eating too many pies than drinking. Both will kill you, by the way, but I suppose it is at least a little bit better. But anyway, once you start seeing the confidence and having that confidence to realize that it's not what you want to do, the day-to-day focus shifts from not drinking, because you're not thinking about the alcohol. What it shifts to is, how can we start improving your life, and how can we start improving your relationships? Where can we see the inches in your life to kind of start compounding? And we're going to build this wall one brick at a time. So anyway, that's basically what the program is, and where I come from and what I do. But I mean, how far are we into this stream? Okay, so we're half an hour. God, I've been talking for half an hour. Let's have a look. I did have some other talking points here. There is nobody in the chat, but that's probably my fault because I screwed up the chat, the stream at the end of. I screwed up the stream at the start, didn't I? So yeah, something else. I've got a few notes here. That's why I'm kind of looking down at my screen. So I think one of the other things I'll say as well is most people that I work with that have a problem drinking tend to be quite neurodivergent. Whatever you want to say, whether they're on the autism spectrum, whether they're on the ADHD spectrum, or whatever, or have anxiety or depression. Although with anxiety and depression, it's a bit of an Ouroboros. It's a bit of a snake eating its own tail. You never know where, did you drink because you were anxious, or are you anxious because you drink, and same with depression. It's a bit, there's probably a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. But most people, I find, because a lot of the people that I work with tend to be quite successful. So it's CEOs, directors of big companies, business owners, people with kind of professional jobs, a lot of sales directors, and a lot of salespeople, a lot of lawyers, a lot of doctors, and even surgeons, a lot of engineers in IT, people with quite sort of stressful jobs and quite stressful home lives and stuff, because with more money, more problems. Do you know what I mean? You've got mortgages, you've got car payments, you've got college for your kids, you've got a wife, you've got a million things. So what tends to happen is these successful people have built quite successful lives because their brains generally are requiring a lot of stimulation. So they're able to solve problems quickly, and they're able to move forward in their careers. They have quite sort of analytical minds, quite logical minds sometimes, and they're able to make decisions quickly. And this is the problem, because the decisions you've made quickly early in your career of like, I have this problem, let's just say anxiety, because that was the one for me. It might not be for you, it'll be something else. Maybe it's a social thing, I don't know. But for me, I realized that if I had a drink, I wasn't anxious, and I was quite socially anxious as well. I had a fear of being judged. It was very weird. But I would have a drink and that would go away. And then over time, it took more and more and more alcohol to kind of get back to baseline. So what you've been doing is, because you're used to making sort of quick decisions, dealing with them, and you make hundreds and thousands of decisions, some of them really important per day, you at some point in the past made a decision around alcohol and just solved the problem. Boom, quick, next one. And that's where it's kind of biting you in the arse now. That's basically most of the people I work with. So there are people, it's like captains of airlines, very there's also I've touched on this before, but I've actually worked with a couple of people in the public eye that you'd probably know who they were. We're not talking like A-list people, but you'd know who they are. And they've been comedians. So there's been 2 comedians and 1 actor, where alcohol features heavily in that world. It's clubs, it's after the kind of shoot or after the play or something like that. There's a lot of kind of pent up energy, and these quite creative people tend to have quite chaotic minds as well, and they have quite chaotic lives because they don't live in they don't really have a job per se. They have a very strange existence, a very strange job. So it requires a certain set of tools to get those people back to a place of baseline and not pouring alcohol into their systems. But yeah, so let's have a little look. I'm sorry about that. I think I kind of lost my train of thought there. You'll have to forgive me. I'm sure if you're watching this in the video on demand, you're probably typing going, "Oh, you were saying something. Yeah, and why didn't you finish your thought?" Well, the reason I didn't finish my thought is I went off on a tangent. I'm one of these people that their brain thinks at 1,000 miles an hour, and I've just poured coffee into my face, so my brain is just is doing brain things. Anyway, I think I'm probably going to end this stream here because I screwed it up at the start, and no one's in the stream. So I hope as a member, if you've made it this far, maybe drop me a comment. Just type Wally or something in the comments, just so I know you've got to this point. But let me know if any of this resonated with you. I'm going to do more of these live streams for the community, for the members. What I would like to happen, I'd like to get, I know there's only about 5 or 6 of us at the moment. I'd like to get a lot more members in. And what we can do is we can do a bit of live coaching. We can talk about what's on your mind, what's happening with you. Are you struggling at the moment? Even success stories. I'm big on positivity. I'm big on looking forward, but a bit of live coaching doesn't hurt. I know a lot of people, don't have as deep a pockets as maybe the main program that I run. They basically won't have the money that it costs. And what I don't want to do is have the kind of too elitist look of things. I'd like to have this community where it's very affordable. It's like $7 a month, as opposed to the main program where that is a bit more exclusive, whereas this is much more accessible. Anyway, thank you for watching. I look forward to your comments. I look forward to future live streams. And if you missed this stream because I ended the other stream, then I apologize. That is my bad. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.